I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the emerald necklace for the third time. My hands trembled despite my best efforts to steady them. 6 months had trickled by, an eternity since my world had imploded. Yet, walking into the Ashford mansion tonight felt like stepping into quicksand, each foot sinking further with every breath. The fundraising gala was in full swing when my cab pulled up to the circular drive. Crystal chandeliers blazed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm, golden light across the meticulously manicured lawns. My family's name, etched in stone above the grand entrance, mocked me, a silent reminder of everything I'd lost. This used to be mine, all of it. Now, I was the cautionary tale, the scandal whispered about over flutes of champagne and polite smiles. Victoria Ashford, 26 years old, former CFO of Ashford Industries, accused of embezzling $2 million, a disgraced pariah among Aries' social elite. The headlines had been merciless, each word a fresh wound. I squared my shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked through those massive oak doors one last time. The main ballroom fell silent the moment I entered. Conversations died mid-sentence, heads turned, eyes widened. A woman in a burgundy gown actually gasped, clutching her pearls as if I'd brought the plague. Her expression a mixture of shock and distaste. Perfect. Just what I'd expected. My father built this company from nothing, pouring his heart and soul into every brick. I reminded myself that he believed in integrity above all else. I wouldn't let his memory be tarnished by running away, wouldn't let their whispers define me. Evelyn spotted me immediately. My stepmother glided across the polished marble floor in a silver dress that probably cost more than my current monthly rent, the fabric shimmering under the chandeliers. Her platinum blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo, accentuating her sharp features, her ice-blue eyes narrowing as she approached. "Victoria!" Her voice dripped with false sweetness, a honeyed venom. "How brave of you to show your face here." Behind her, Jonathan Reed materialized like a bad dream I couldn't seem to shake. My ex-fiancé looked as polished as ever in his tailored tuxedo, every detail impeccable, his light brown hair styled perfectly. The golden boy everyone adored, the heir apparent, the man I'd planned to marry, the man who'd helped destroy me, still pretending to be innocent, a facade he wore so well. Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes, a practiced gesture that lacked any warmth. That's rich considering the evidence, I thought bitterly. Sophia Lancaster appeared at his elbow, her fiery red hair cascading over her bare shoulders. My former best friend, the woman I'd trusted with every secret, every insecurity, now my betrayer. She looped her arm through Jonathan's possessively, a clear display of ownership. "Victoria, darling," she purred, her green eyes sparkling with malice. "I heard you're working as a freelance accountant now. How quaint." The crowd had formed a loose circle around us, vultures sensing blood, eager for a glimpse of the fallen. "I heard she lives in some tiny apartment in Brooklyn," someone stage whispered, their voice dripping with judgment. "Can you imagine after growing up with all this?" My chest tightened, but I forced my expression to remain neutral, a mask of indifference. "Don't give them the satisfaction," I told myself. "The board made the right decision removing her," Evelyn announced loudly, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "We can't have thieves running our company, even if they share the Ashford name." She'd married my father a year before his sudden heart attack, their union a whirlwind romance that had shocked everyone. Within months of his death, she'd consolidated power, turned the board against me, and supported every accusation Jonathan and Sophia leveled, their alliance unbreakable. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, though what good would it do? My words would be lost in the sea of their accusations. That's when the atmosphere shifted, a subtle change that rippled through the crowd like a wave. Conversations stuttered, eyes darted around, heads turned toward the grand entrance. "Is that Adrian Volov?" I caught the whispers, laced with awe and curiosity. "I didn't know he was coming tonight." Someone said he donated $500,000 to the foundation, his generosity the talk of the room. I turned, my attention drawn to the figure who commanded attention effortlessly. Tall, at least 6'2", with jet black hair swept back from a striking face, a visage that seemed carved from stone. His charcoal suit fit like it had been sewn onto his powerful frame, accentuating his broad shoulders and lean physique. But it was his eyes that arrested me, holding me captive in their gaze. Steel gray with hints of blue, they swept across the room with calculated precision, missing nothing. Our gazes met across the crowded ballroom, a brief but intense connection that sent a shiver down my spine. Something electric passed between us in that split second, a spark of recognition. Though we'd never met, a jolt of awareness that made my breath catch in my throat. He moved through the crowd like a predator, his movements fluid and purposeful, people unconsciously stepping aside, clearing his path. His presence radiated controlled power, the kind that didn't need to announce itself, the kind that demanded respect. Mr. Volov. Evelyn's voice had taken on a sickly sweet quality, a desperate attempt to regain his attention. What an honor. We're so grateful for your generous contribution. He barely glanced at her, his attention still fixed on me, his gaze unwavering. Victoria Ashford. His voice was deep, smooth, a low rumble that resonated through the room. He extended his hand, his touch sending a jolt through my system. It's been far too long. I blinked, my mind reeling. Been too long? We'd never met. But something in his steady gaze, in the confidence he exuded, told me to play along, to trust my instincts. Mr. Volov? I said, placing my hand in his, feeling a surprising warmth spread up my arm, his grip firm and reassuring. What a pleasant surprise. Shock rippled through the onlookers, their whispers growing louder, fueled by confusion and speculation. Evelyn's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. Would you honor me with a dance? Adrian asked, still holding my hand, his eyes never leaving mine. Around us, the crowd buzzed with curiosity and disbelief, their questions hanging in the air. Jonathan's face had gone red, his anger palpable. Sophia looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, her expression sour and resentful. I'd be delighted, I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil within. He led me onto the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz, the music filling the void. His hands settled on my waist, firm and sure, his touch sending a wave of heat through me. We moved together with surprising ease, our bodies finding a rhythm, as if we'd danced together 1,000 times before. Who are you? I whispered, my voice barely audible above the music. His lips curved slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Someone who knows you didn't steal that money. My heart stuttered, skipping a beat in my chest. What? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. I considered investing in Ashford Industries about 8 months ago, he said quietly, guiding me through a turn, his movements graceful and controlled. Commissioned an independent audit. The financial irregularities were there, but the patterns didn't match your work habits. I stared at him, trying to decipher his motives. I don't understand. Someone with deep system access orchestrated that theft, he explained, his voice low and urgent. His gray-blue eyes held mine, their intensity unwavering. The transaction times, the IP addresses, the digital signatures. None of it aligned with your typical patterns. Hope, dangerous and fragile, fluttered in my chest, a flicker of light in the darkness. Why are you telling me this? Because I have the resources to prove who actually took that money, he said, his voice dropping even lower, a conspiratorial whisper. And I'm willing to help you under one condition. Of course, I thought bitterly. Nothing came free. What condition? Work with me as a financial consultant. I need someone with your inside knowledge of Ashford Industries. Suspicion warred with desperation. Why would he care about clearing my name? What did he stand to gain? Something dark flickered across his features, a hint of a hidden agenda. Let's just say I've seen good people destroyed by lies before, he said, his voice laced with steel. I won't stand by and watch it happen again. The music swelled around us, the violins reaching a crescendo. I was acutely aware of every point where our bodies touched, the warmth of his hand on my waist, the brush of his leg against mine, the strength in his frame, the way his scent, a complex blend of wood smoke and oak, wrapped around me, intoxicating and unfamiliar. "I don't even know who you are," I protested weakly, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "Adrian Volov, real estate developer, among other things," he said, his mouth quirking into a wry smile. "You can look me up. I'm sure you'll find my reputation interesting." That sounded like a warning, a subtle threat veiled in politeness. The song ended, the last notes fading into the silence. He released me slowly, but his fingers lingered on mine for just a moment, a fleeting touch that sent another shiver down my spine. "I'll send a car for you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, he said, his voice firm and decisive. "My office. We have work to do, Miss Ashford." He handed me a business card, his name embossed in silver against the black background. Then he was gone, moving through the crowd with the same commanding presence, leaving me standing alone on the dance floor, clutching his card like a lifeline. Around me, the whispers had reached a fever pitch, the speculation swirling like a storm. "Did you see that? Who is he to her?" Evelyn's face had gone white with fury, her eyes burning with resentment. Jonathan looked murderous, his jaw clenched tight. Sophia's perfectly manicured nails dug into her champagne flute, threatening to shatter the glass. I tucked the card into my clutch and walked out with my head held high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing my fear. For the first time in 6 months, something other than despair burned in my chest. A spark of defiance, a flicker of hope. I spent half the night researching Adrian Volov, poring over articles and news reports, searching for answers. What I found made my stomach twist with equal parts fear and fascination. A dangerous cocktail of intrigue. Real estate magnate, yes, a successful businessman with a vast empire. But the articles buried beneath that legitimate surface told a different story. Whispers of connections to people who operated in the shadows, deals that somehow always swung in his favor, competitors who mysteriously withdrew from projects after crossing him. Nothing concrete, nothing prosecutable, just a pattern of power that extended far beyond boardrooms, a network of influence that seemed to bend reality to his will. At 9:45 the next morning, a black Mercedes pulled up outside my modest Brooklyn apartment, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the brick facade. The driver, stone-faced and professional, opened the door without a word, his silence adding to the air of mystery. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy suit and a white blouse, pulling my hair into a neat bun, creating a shield of armor for whatever came next. The ride to the financial district took 30 minutes, the city skyline looming larger as we approached. Adrian's building was a gleaming tower of steel and glass, a monument to ambition, the kind that screamed wealth and influence. His company name, Volkov Enterprises, etched discreetly near the entrance, a subtle display of power. Security cleared me immediately, as if they'd been expecting me, their efficiency unnerving. The elevator rocketed to the 42nd floor, the ascent dizzying. Adrian's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with an air of quiet competence, led me through a suite of offices, each more luxurious than the last. Everything was sleek, modern, expensive, designed to impress. We stopped at massive double doors, the wood polished to a mirror sheen. "Mr. Volkov is waiting," she said simply, her tone conveying a sense of importance. His office was corner-facing with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Manhattan, a panorama of power and ambition. Adrian stood at one window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid-fire in what sounded like Russian, the words rolling off his tongue with a harsh intensity. He gestured for me to sit without breaking his conversation, his focus unwavering. I took the opportunity to study him in daylight, observing his every detail. The black suit today was just as perfectly tailored as the one he'd worn last night, accentuating his strong physique. His profile was sharp, classical, like a Roman statue come to life. That small scar on his chin added an edge to his otherwise refined features, a hint of a past he kept hidden. He ended the call and turned, those gray-blue eyes assessing me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You came," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You said you could prove my innocence. I'd be insane not to show up?" I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. He moved to his desk, a massive expanse of polished wood, pulling out a thick folder. "I reviewed the audit from 8 months ago," he said, his voice businesslike. "The discrepancies were subtle, but they were there." He spread documents across the polished surface, a dizzying array of financial statements, access logs, transaction records, a labyrinth of data. "Here," he pointed to a series of timestamps, his finger precise. "The questionable transfers occurred at 3 o'clock in the morning on multiple occasions. According to your employment records, you'd never accessed the system after 11 p.m. in your entire tenure as CFO." My pulse quickened, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I worked normal hours," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "My father always said family came before late nights at the office." "Exactly," Adrian said, pulling up another document. "The IP addresses traced to the building, but they came from workstations that weren't yours. Someone logged in using credentials that mirrored your digital signature, but the machine fingerprints didn't match." I leaned forward, scanning the data, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the information. My hands started shaking, the weight of the evidence overwhelming. "This proves someone framed me," I said, my voice filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "It proves anomalies existed," he corrected, his voice measured. "But it doesn't tell us who." His expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "That's where you come in. What do you need?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Your knowledge of Ashford Industries. Who had the technical expertise to pull this off? Who had access to create false credentials? Who stood to gain from your removal?" The obvious answers burned on my tongue, the names echoing in my mind. Jonathan, Sophia, Evelyn. But I'd learned the hard way that obvious didn't mean provable, that appearances could be deceiving. "Why are you doing this?" The question burst out before I could stop it. A desperate plea for understanding. "You don't know me. What do you get from helping me?" Adrian's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, something painful flickering behind them. 5 years ago, my younger brother, Alex, went into business with someone he trusted. He began, his voice flat, emotionless. A partner who seemed legitimate, ambitious, honest. He paused, his gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the window. She embezzled everything, left him with nothing but debt and humiliation. He couldn't face the shame, the judgment, the crushing weight of failure. The unspoken words hung heavy between us, filling the silence with unspoken grief. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice filled with genuine sympathy. I had the resources to help him, connections, money, influence, he continued, his voice devoid of emotion. But I was too focused on my own empire to notice until it was too late. His gaze locked onto mine, his eyes filled with a raw intensity. "I won't make that mistake again. I see good people being destroyed by liars, and I have the power to stop it. So I do." The raw honesty in his admission stole my breath, the vulnerability he revealed beneath his carefully constructed facade. This wasn't just about business or justice, a calculated risk or a strategic alliance. This was personal for him, driven by a deep-seated sense of guilt and a burning desire for redemption. "What do you want in return?" I asked carefully, bracing myself for the inevitable price. "Work with me as a consultant," he repeated, his voice firm. "Your expertise in aerospace component manufacturing gives me leverage in deals I'm pursuing. 3 months in exchange. I clear your name and help you reclaim what's yours. 3 months working for a man whose reputation walked the line between legitimate and dangerous. A man who operated in the shadows and bent rules to his will. 3 months tied to someone who made my pulse race in ways that had nothing to do with fear, a dangerous attraction that threatened to consume me. What happens if we find proof? I asked, my voice barely audible. That's your decision, he said, his expression unreadable. We can go to the authorities or we can handle it privately. This is your justice, Victoria, not my revenge. Something about the way he said my name, the way it rolled off his tongue, sent warmth curling through my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in far too long. I accept, I said, my voice filled with a newfound determination. Adrian nodded once, decisive, his eyes unwavering. There's a private office 2 doors down. I've had everything you'll need set up. Start by reviewing internal communications from the 6 months before the theft. Look for anything unusual. He handed me a security badge and a tablet loaded with files, his touch sending a jolt through my system. The office he'd prepared was smaller than his, but still luxurious, a testament to his wealth and influence. Mahogany desk, leather chair, a window overlooking the city, a view that stretched for miles. For someone supposedly working as a temporary consultant, this was excessive, a display of resources that bordered on ostentatious. I dove into the files, losing myself in numbers and patterns, searching for clues. This was familiar territory, a world I understood, a language I spoke fluently, comfortable in a way that nothing else had been for months. Hours passed, the city lights twinkling outside my window. Adrian appeared twice, bringing coffee the first time, his presence a welcome distraction. Staying to review findings the second, he stood close enough that I caught his scent again, that intoxicating blend of wood smoke and oak that seemed uniquely his. A sensory assault that both unnerved and intrigued me. Here, I said, pulling up a spreadsheet, my voice betraying a hint of excitement. Sophia Lancaster. She was in marketing. Shouldn't have had any reason to access financial systems. Adrian leaned over my shoulder, his presence overwhelming, his body heat radiating against my back. Temporary credentials were issued to her workstation. I pointed out, my finger tracing the screen. 3 separate occasions in the months before the theft. Each time lasted exactly 48 hours before expiring. His hand came down on the desk beside mine, bracketing me in, trapping me in his sphere of influence. Who authorized those credentials? I pulled up the approval logs, my heart pounding in my chest, and my blood ran cold. Evelyn Ashford, my stepmother. The first concrete connection, the missing piece of the puzzle. Sophia had access she shouldn't have possessed, access granted by someone with the authority to approve it. Adrian's voice was low, satisfied, a hunter closing in on his prey. Now we're getting somewhere. I turned my head and found his face inches from mine, his proximity making it difficult to breathe. Those gray-blue eyes held mine with an intensity that made breathing difficult, their depths unreadable. The air between us felt charged, electric, a current of attraction that threatened to ignite. He straightened abruptly, putting distance between us, breaking the spell. Good work, he said, his voice businesslike. Tomorrow, we dig deeper into Sophia's access logs. What about Jonathan? I asked, trying to ignore the disappointment at his withdrawal, the lingering warmth where his body had been. Your ex-fiancé? Adrian said, something dark crossing his features, a hint of displeasure. Do you still have any of his personal information? Bank accounts, passwords? We shared some accounts when we were engaged. I admitted, my voice barely audible. I was removed after the accusations, but I remember the institutions. Write them down, he said, handing me a notepad, his movements sharp and decisive. I have contacts who can pull records discreetly. Is that legal? I asked, my voice filled with apprehension. His smile was sharp, predatory, a glimpse of the ruthlessness that lay beneath his charm. It's complicated, he said, his tone dismissive. A shiver ran down my spine, a visceral reaction to his power. This was the dangerous side everyone whispered about, the part that operated in gray areas and bent rules to his will. I should go, I said, suddenly aware of how late it had gotten, the city lights twinkling outside my window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A beautiful but fleeting moment. "My driver will take you home," Adrian said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Victoria," he said as he walked me to the elevator, his voice softer now. I turned back, my heart pounding in my chest. "You did good today," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "This is just the beginning." Hope, that fragile thing I tried so hard to suppress, bloomed a little brighter in my chest, a fragile flower pushing through concrete. On the ride back to Brooklyn, I stared at my reflection in the tinted window, searching for answers. For the first time in 6 months, I looked like someone with purpose, someone who wasn't just surviving, but fighting back, reclaiming her life. My phone buzzed, breaking my reverie. An unknown number, a message waiting. "Dinner tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Address attached. We need to discuss next steps away from the office." No signature, but I knew who it was from, the sender unmistakable. I should have been wary, should have questioned why he wanted to meet outside work, should have remembered that men like Adrian Volkov didn't do anything without calculated reasons, that every action had a purpose. Instead, I typed back a single word, my heart pounding with anticipation. Yes, the restaurant was the kind of place that didn't advertise, a hidden gem known only to a select few. You either knew about it or you didn't belong, its exclusivity a draw for the city's elite. Tucked into a brownstone in the West Village, it had no sign, just a discreet brass number plate beside an unmarked door. A secret whispered among those in the know. Adrian was already seated when the hostess led me to a private corner table, his presence filling the small space. He rose as I approached, his movements graceful and fluid, and I noticed he'd forgotten the tie tonight. His usual formality replaced with a relaxed air. His white shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms, a glimpse of the man beneath the suit. Somehow, this version of him seemed even more dangerous than the suited executive, more raw, more untamed. "You found it," he said, his lips curving into a smile. "Your directions were precise," I replied, taking the seat he offered, hyper-aware of his proximity as he settled across from me. The space was intimate, candlelit, the soft glow casting shadows on his face, accentuating his sharp features. Definitely not the environment I'd expected for discussing business strategy, the ambience more suited for romance than corporate espionage. A server appeared with wine, poured without us ordering, a testament to Adrian's influence. Apparently, he'd already made arrangements, anticipating my needs before I even voiced them. "I spoke with my investigator today," he said once we were alone, his voice low and intimate, a confidential whisper. "The credentials Evelyn authorized for Sophia weren't just unusual. They granted access to financial systems that even most executives don't touch." My fingers tightened around the wine glass, my knuckles turning white. "She gave Sophia the keys to everything," I said, my voice filled with disbelief. "Which means they were working together from the start. But we still need to connect Jonathan," Adrian said, his eyes narrowing. "He proposed to me 2 years ago," I said, the memory tasting bitter, like poison on my tongue. 3 months before my father died. Everyone thought it was romantic, a fairy tale come to life. The golden couple, destined for greatness. "You don't think so anymore," Adrian observed, his gaze piercing. "I think the timing was convenient," I admitted, my voice filled with resentment. I met his gaze, my eyes filled with a mixture of pain and anger. My father was grooming me to take over as CEO eventually. Marrying me would have given Jonathan indirect access to everything, a clear path to power. Then Dad died, and everything changed. Evelyn pushed me into the CFO role instead, a move that seemed strategic at the time. And suddenly, I'm the perfect scapegoat, the convenient fall guy. Adrian leaned back, studying me with those penetrating eyes, his expression unreadable. "You're not as naive as they thought you were," he observed, his voice laced with respect. "I was naive enough to trust them," I countered, my voice filled with bitterness. "Trust isn't weakness, Victoria," Adrian said, his voice firm and unwavering. "Betrayal says everything about them and nothing about you." The conviction in his voice made something warm unfurl in my chest, a flicker of hope in the darkness. When was the last time someone had defended me without wanting something in return, without an ulterior motive? What about you? I asked, my curiosity piqued. You said your brother was betrayed by someone he trusted. That must have changed how you see people. His expression shuddered briefly, a glimpse of the pain he kept hidden. It taught me that loyalty is rare and should be protected when found, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. Alex was kind, trusting. He saw the best in everyone. Pain flickered across his features, a shadow of grief. She exploited that, took everything he'd worked for, and left him with nothing but shame. How long after did he? I couldn't finish the question, the words too painful to utter. 3 months, Adrian said, his voice barely a whisper. Enough time for the debt collectors to circle, for his reputation to be destroyed, for him to lose all hope. Adrian's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists. I was closing a deal in Singapore when I got the call, he said, his voice filled with regret. By the time I flew back, it was too late. Without thinking, I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine, offering a silent gesture of support. His skin was warm, rough with calluses I wouldn't have expected from a man who worked behind a desk, a testament to a life lived beyond the boardroom. He stared at our joined hands, something vulnerable flashing in his eyes, a crack in his carefully constructed armor. Then his fingers turned, intertwining with mine, his grip surprisingly strong. The gesture felt more intimate than it should have, a connection that went beyond words. I should have been there, he said quietly, his voice filled with remorse. Should have paid attention instead of chasing the next deal, the next acquisition. You can't blame yourself for someone else's cruelty, I countered, my voice filled with conviction. His thumb traced small circles on my palm, sending sparks up my arm, a sensation that both thrilled and frightened me. Yet here you are, blaming yourself for trusting people you loved, he said, his lips curving into a wry smile. Touché, I said, my voice barely audible. The server arrived with our meal, forcing us to separate, breaking the physical connection. But the charged atmosphere remained, humming between us like a live wire, a tangible energy that filled the space. We ate mostly in silence, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward, a companionable quiet that spoke volumes. Every so often, our eyes would meet, and I'd see questions there I wasn't ready to answer. Questions I suspected mirrored my own, unspoken desires that lingered in the air. My investigator found something else, Adrian said as we finished, his voice drawing me back to the present. Jonathan has banking relationships with institutions in the Cayman Islands. Offshore accounts. My heart stuttered, skipping a beat. That's where wealthy people hide money they don't want traced, I said, my voice filled with a growing sense of dread. Exactly, Adrian confirmed, his expression grim. I have someone working on getting the details, but these things take time. The bank secrecy laws are strict. How long? I asked, my voice filled with impatience. Days? Maybe a week? He paused, his eyes meeting mine, his gaze unwavering. I need you to understand something, Victoria, he said, his voice firm and serious. Once we go down this path, there's no turning back. If we find proof that Jonathan took that money, the consequences will be severe. For all of them, I thought, the bitterness rising in my throat. Good, I said, the viciousness in my own voice surprising me. 6 months ago, I would have hesitated, would have worried about being vindictive or cruel. Now I wanted them to feel a fraction of what they'd put me through, to experience the pain and humiliation they'd inflicted on me. Adrian's eyes gleamed with approval, a hint of satisfaction in his gaze. Then we're agreed, he said, his voice decisive. We pursue this to the end. He paid the check despite my protests and walked me outside, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, a casual touch that sent a shiver down my spine. The summer night was warm, the village streets still busy with couples and groups enjoying the weather, the city alive with energy. I'll drive you home, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. You don't have to, I protested weakly, though a part of me wanted him to. I want to, he said, his eyes meeting mine, his gaze intense. Something in the way he said it made refusal impossible. A silent plea that resonated within me. His car was parked nearby. A sleek black Audi that probably cost more than I used to make in a year. A symbol of his wealth and power. He opened my door, and I caught that scent of wood smoke and oak again as he leaned close. His proximity sending my heart racing. The drive to Brooklyn was quiet, comfortable. A peaceful respite from the turmoil within. I watched the city lights blur past, a mesmerizing display of color and movement, acutely aware of Adrian's presence beside me. The strong hands on the steering wheel, the way his jaw flexed when he concentrated, the subtle signs of his controlled power. He pulled up outside my building but didn't immediately unlock the doors, the silence stretching between us. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "For dinner. For everything you're doing." "Don't thank me yet," he said, his eyes meeting mine, his gaze unwavering. "This is just beginning." I should have opened the door, should have said goodnight and walked away, should have maintained a professional distance. Instead, I stayed frozen, caught in the intensity of his gaze, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He reached up, and for one breathless moment, I thought he might touch my face, might break through the carefully constructed barriers we'd both erected. His hand hovered near my cheek, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, a tantalizing promise of something more. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment, the intrusive sound breaking the spell. Adrian pulled back, his jaw tight with frustration, his eyes clouding over. He glanced at the screen and swore under his breath in Russian, the words harsh and guttural. "I have to take this," he said. His voice had gone cold, businesslike, devoid of warmth. "Go inside. Lock your door." Something in his tone sent alarms skittering down my spine, a sense of impending danger. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice filled with apprehension. "Just go, Victoria," he repeated, his voice firm. "Now." I climbed out, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding in my chest. He waited until I was through the building's entrance before driving away. His movements sharp and decisive, the phone already pressed to his ear, his attention focused elsewhere. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, a walk-up that always left me breathless. I climbed the stairs slowly, still processing the evening, replaying every moment in my mind. The way Adrian had looked at me across the table, the intensity in his gaze, the unspoken desires that lingered between us, the feeling of his hand in mine, the warmth of his touch, the connection that had surprised me, the moment in the car that almost became something more, the tantalizing possibility of a romance that could consume me. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, reaching for the light switch, my hand fumbling in the darkness. The living room looked wrong, a subtle sense of unease that sent a shiver down my spine. Paper scattered across my coffee table instead of neatly stacked, the organized chaos I usually maintained disrupted. Kitchen drawers slightly ajar, evidence of a hurried search. The closet door open when I always kept it closed, a violation of my personal space. Someone had been in my apartment, had invaded my sanctuary, had rifled through my belongings. My blood ran cold, fear gripping me like a vice. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the first number in my recent contacts, my voice trembling. Adrian answered on the first ring, his voice sharp and urgent. "What's wrong?" "Someone broke into my apartment," I said. My voice came out surprisingly steady, despite the fear coursing through me. "They went through my things." Silence. A pregnant pause filled with unspoken dread. Then his voice deadly calm, sending a chill down my spine. "Get out of there now. Don't touch anything. Go to the lobby and wait for me." "Adrian, I can't just leave," I protested, my voice rising in panic. "I need to call the police and Victoria." "Leave now," he commanded. His tone brooked no argument. "I'm 10 minutes away." I grabbed my purse and fled, adrenaline coursing through my veins, my mind racing with possibilities. True to his word, Adrian's Audi screeched up outside exactly 9 minutes later, his arrival a testament to his efficiency and his unwavering determination. He got out, his expression darker than I'd ever seen it, his eyes burning with fury, his jaw clenched tight. 2 other men emerged from a second car that had been tailing him. "Stay put," he instructed me, before rattling off a string of orders in rapid-fire Russian to the men accompanying him. They entered my building with the kind of precision you'd expect from a military operation. Adrian stood beside me on the sidewalk, close enough that our shoulders were touching. His presence radiated a controlled fury. "They know we're investigating," I whispered, stating the obvious. "Yes." His voice was like granite, which in his world meant we were getting perilously close to something they wanted to keep buried deep. About 15 minutes ticked by, and then one of the men returned, shaking his head in dismay. He spoke to Adrian in Russian, gesturing upward towards my apartment. Adrian turned to me, his expression grim and unreadable. "They're gone," he stated flatly. "Professionals. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. They were searching for something specific." "How did they get in?" I asked, my mind racing. "Does anyone else have a key?" My stomach dropped like a stone. "Jonathan. From back when we were engaged. I'd never asked for it back after everything imploded between us. Of course." Adrienne's jaw clenched, a telltale sign of his simmering anger. "Pack a bag," he commanded. "Enough for a few days." "What?" I asked, bewildered. "No, I can't just—" "You're not safe here, Victoria," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Not anymore." His eyes locked onto mine, fierce and unyielding. "You're coming with me." Adrienne's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, a swanky part of town. The elevator opened directly into his apartment, requiring a key card and a biometric scan for access. Security measures that would have seemed utterly excessive just a week prior now felt entirely, frighteningly necessary. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Hudson River. Modern furniture in stark blacks and grays completed the scene. Art that was probably worth more than most people's houses adorned the walls. Everything was immaculate, almost austere in its precise order. "Guest room is down that hall," Adrian said, gesturing. "Second door on the right. Private bathroom. Everything you should need is in there. If something's missing, let me know." I followed his directions, finding a bedroom that was larger than my entire Brooklyn apartment. The bed was enormous, dressed in charcoal linens that looked impossibly soft to the touch. The attached bathroom had heated floors and a shower with enough jets to qualify as a car wash. "This is temporary," I reminded myself. Asterisk, just until we figure out who broke in and why. When I emerged from the guest room, Adrian had shed his jacket and was pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers. He handed me one without asking if I even wanted it. "Drink," he commanded. "You've had a shock." The whiskey burned going down, but a welcome warmth spread through my chest. I sank onto his leather couch, suddenly overcome with exhaustion. Adrian sat beside me, close, but carefully not touching. "My security team will monitor your apartment," he said, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. "If anyone returns, we'll know." "You have a security team?" I asked, surprised. His mouth quirked slightly in a wry smile. "I have many teams, Victoria," he said, "for various purposes." Because he was Adrian Volov, I thought, asterisk, the man who operated in shadows and made problems disappear. Asterisk, "Thank you," I said quietly, "for coming so quickly. For this." "You don't need to thank me for keeping you safe," he stated, his eyes holding mine with unwavering intensity. "That's non-negotiable." Something in his intensity made my breath catch in my throat. The air between us felt heavy, charged with everything unspoken. Adrienne's phone buzzed, abruptly breaking the moment. He glanced at it and stood. "I need to make some calls," he said, his tone businesslike. "Get some rest. We'll strategize in the morning." He disappeared into what I assumed was his home office, leaving me alone in the expansive living room. I finished the whiskey and retreated to the guest room. Though sleep felt impossible, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the comforting smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was, or what day it was. Then yesterday came rushing back in a flood of unwanted memories. The break-in, Adrienne's penthouse, everything. I found him in the kitchen dressed in dark jeans and a black Henley that showed off his powerful build. Somehow, he looked even more dangerous in casual clothes than he did in his tailored suits. "Coffee's fresh," he said by way of greeting. He poured me a cup without asking how I took it, adding cream and 1 sugar. Exactly right. Had he noticed my preferences, or had he just guessed? "My investigator came through," Adrienne said, pulling out his tablet and showing me a series of documents. "Jonathan Reed is the listed beneficiary of an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account was opened 7 months ago." My hands trembled as I took the tablet from him. There it was, proof in black and white. $2 million, I whispered, staring at the balance. The exact amount that had gone missing from my accounts, transferred in increments over 3 months, then moved to this anonymous account. Adrienne's voice was hard, devoid of any sympathy. "He stole from you, framed you, and stashed the money where he thought no one would ever find it." Rage, white-hot and consuming, flooded through me, threatening to drown me in its intensity. Jonathan had looked me in the eye, told me he loved me, planned our future together, all while systematically destroying everything my father had built. "We have him," I said, looking up at Adrienne, a flicker of hope igniting within me. "This is proof. It's proof he has the money. We still need to connect him to Sophia and Evelyn," Adrienne said, his expression thoughtful. "Show this was a coordinated effort, not just one person's crime." "How?" I asked, desperate for answers. Adrienne's smile was predatory, promising pain to those who had wronged me. "We dig deeper," he said. "My specialist recovered deleted emails from Ashford Industries servers," he continued. "Encrypted communications between all 3 of them." He pulled up the files, and I began to read through them with growing horror and fury. One email from Jonathan to Evelyn, sent 9 months prior, read, "Victoria trusts me completely. Once we're married, gaining access won't be an issue." Another, from Sophia to Evelyn. The credentials worked perfectly. No one's questioned why I needed them. Evelyn's reply, sent to both Jonathan and Sophia, chilled me to the bone. "Stay patient. After the transfer completes, we frame her and remove her from the company. I'll control the board. Jonathan manages operations. Sophia handles public relations. Everything is planned." My vision blurred with unshed tears. Every moment had been calculated. Every smile, every touch, every declaration of love. All of it meticulously orchestrated to destroy me. "They planned this for almost a year," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "Since before my father died." Adrienne moved closer, his presence solid and grounding. "Evelyn married your father specifically to gain access," he explained, his voice gentle but firm. "She met him through Jonathan, who was already dating you. They used every connection, every relationship as a weapon. My father." The grief I'd been holding back for months crashed over me in a tidal wave of sorrow. They used his death as an opportunity to further their schemes. "I'm so sorry," Adrienne said, his hand settling on my shoulder, warm and steady. "I know this doesn't help, but you were chosen because you were good at your job, trusted, and had access to everything. They needed someone competent to frame. That's why it worked." "I want them destroyed," I said, the viciousness in my tone surprising even me. "Not just caught, not just punished. I want them to lose everything the way I did." Adrienne's eyes gleamed with dark approval. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." Over the next few days, we fell into an unexpected routine. Mornings were spent working through evidence at Adrienne's private office, sifting through documents and piecing together the puzzle. Afternoons were dedicated to planning our next moves, strategizing how to dismantle their carefully constructed empire. Evenings were reserved for talking over dinner, sharing small pieces of ourselves in the quiet moments between strategy sessions. I learned that Adrian spoke 4 languages fluently, that he'd built his empire from almost nothing after immigrating from Russia at the tender age of 19, that he took his coffee black and rarely slept more than 5 hours a night. He learned that I'd wanted to be a violinist before business school, that I missed my father every single day, that I hated the color yellow and loved thunderstorms. The intimacy of it terrified me. We were growing closer in ways that had nothing to do with our investigation, blurring the lines between professional and personal. One night, I found him standing at the windows long past midnight, staring out at the glittering city. Something about his posture screamed loneliness. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly, breaking the silence. He turned, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "I thought you'd gone to bed hours ago." "Bad dreams," I said, shrugging. "Keeps happening lately." I moved to stand beside him, close but not quite touching. We stood in silence, watching the city that never truly slept. Our reflections merged in the dark glass, 2 people existing in the space between past grief and uncertain futures. "When Alexei died," Adrian said quietly, breaking the silence, "I swore I'd never let someone I cared about face destruction alone again, that I'd use everything I'd built to protect people who deserved better." He paused, then turned to face me fully, his eyes searching mine. "Is that what I am to you, Victoria? A mission to atone for not saving your brother?" And the intensity in his eyes stole my breath. "You started as that," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, a chance to do what I couldn't do for Alexei. But now," I continued, "now you're something I didn't plan for, something I didn't expect, something that terrifies me more than any business rival or dangerous deal." His hand lifted, his fingers brushing my cheek with devastating gentleness. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to break free. "Adrian," I breathed, his name escaping my lips in a breathless sigh. He leaned closer, close enough that I could count the silver flecks in his gray-blue eyes, close enough that our breath mingled, close enough that tilting my head up just slightly would bring our lips together. The moment stretched, pulled taut like a wire about to snap. Then Adrian stepped back abruptly, his jaw clenched tight. "We shouldn't," he said, his voice rough. "You're still vulnerable, still processing everything. I won't take advantage of that." Frustration and respect warred within my chest. Part of me wanted to argue that I knew exactly what I wanted, but another part recognized the integrity in his restraint. "What if I don't feel vulnerable?" I asked anyway, pushing back against his assumptions. "Then when this is over," he said, his voice still rough, "when you've reclaimed your life and aren't dependent on my protection, ask me again. But not now. Not like this." He was right. I knew he was right, but that didn't stop the ache of wanting that resonated deep within me. "I'm going to destroy them," I said instead, channeling my frustrated energy into cold determination. "Jonathan, Sophia, Evelyn, all of them. And I want them to see it coming." Adrienne's smile was sharp and approving. "Then let's make them paranoid," he said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Let's plant seeds of doubt and watch them tear each other apart before we move in for the final strike. We'll make them think one of them is betraying the others, turning their conspiracy into mutual destruction." He pulled out his phone, already formulating plans. "My people can plant evidence of secret communications, unexplained transactions, meetings that never happened. Psychological warfare is often the most effective kind." Adrienne's eyes met mine, holding a depth of understanding that both comforted and challenged me. "Trust me," he said, and despite everything, despite how little time we'd actually known each other, I did. "Yes," I agreed, my voice firm. Adrienne's plan unfolded with surgical precision. His team created a fake offshore account statement showing that Jonathan had opened a second hidden account, one his partners knew nothing about. The document was leaked to Sophia through an anonymous email made to look like it came from a concerned bank employee. Simultaneously, they planted evidence of encrypted communications between Evelyn and her personal attorney, discussing strategies to pin everything on Jonathan and Sophia if the authorities came asking questions. Within 48 hours, the paranoia began to take hold. Adrian had surveillance on all three of them, and we watched from his office as Sophia called Jonathan repeatedly, her voice shrill with accusation when he finally answered. He denied everything, but his defensiveness only made him sound guiltier. Evelyn met with her lawyer twice in 2 days, each meeting longer than the last. "They're fracturing," Adrian observed, watching the security footage with a detached air. "Give it another week, and they'll destroy each other without us lifting a finger." But I wanted to push harder, to make them feel the walls closing in the way I had. "I want to confront Evelyn," I said casually. "Make her think I've moved on, but drop hints that I know more than I should." Adrian frowned, his brow furrowed in concern. "That's risky," he warned. "If she suspects you're investigating, she already knows someone is." The break-in proved that. I met his gaze, my determination unwavering. "Let me do this," I pleaded. "I know how to get under her skin." He studied me for a long moment, and I could see him reassessing, no longer seeing the broken woman from the gala, but someone who'd found her footing again, someone who was ready to fight back. "All right," he conceded. "But I'm coming with you, close enough to intervene if needed." 2 days later, I arranged to be at the same charity luncheon that Evelyn was attending. Adrian accompanied me, his mere presence drawing attention as it always did. Evelyn spotted me across the room, her expression flickering between surprise and calculation. She approached with her usual false warmth. "Victoria," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "How unexpected to see you here." Her eyes flicked to Adrian, her gaze assessing. "Still keeping interesting company, I see." "Adrienne's been instrumental in helping me rebuild," I said smoothly, my voice laced with a subtle barb. "Turns out there are people who believe in second chances." Something sharp flashed in her eyes. "How generous of him," she replied, her tone saccharine. "I've also been consulting on some financial audits," I continued, pressing my advantage. "Fascinating what you can learn when you really dig into accounts." I kept my tone light, conversational, hinting at the patterns money leaves behind, the digital trails that never really disappear. Evelyn's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sure that's thrilling work," she said, her voice strained. "It is," I replied, letting the implication hang in the air. "Especially when you uncover things people thought were buried." I paused, letting my words sink in. "Well, lovely seeing you," I said, turning to leave. "Adrian and I have another engagement." We left her standing there, and I could feel her gaze burning into my back like a brand. "That was effective," Adrian murmured as we reached his car, a hint of amusement in his voice. "You rattled her." "Good," I said, my satisfaction palpable. "Let her lose sleep, wondering what I know." His hand settled on the small of my back as he guided me into the vehicle, and I tried to ignore the heat that simple touch generated. That evening, Adrian's phone lit up with alerts. His surveillance team had intercepted a call between Evelyn and Jonathan. We listened to the recording together in his office, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. "She knows something," Evelyn's voice said, tight with stress. Victoria was at the luncheon, making veiled references to financial trails and buried information. "She's bluffing," Jonathan replied, but he sounded uncertain. "There's no way she could have found anything." "Then why is she working with Volov?" Evelyn demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "Everyone knows his reputation. He doesn't help people out of kindness." "Maybe he just wants," Jonathan started, but Evelyn cut him off. "Don't be naive," she snapped. "If they're digging, they might find the accounts. We need to move the money again." "That will create more trails," Jonathan protested. "So, we're supposed to just sit still and wait for them to expose us?" The call deteriorated into accusations and panic, each of them turning on the other in a desperate attempt to save themselves. Adrian stopped the recording, his expression grim. "They're breaking," I said, a sense of satisfaction warming my chest. "Actually, they're falling apart," he corrected. "Which means we need to move carefully. Cornered animals are always dangerous." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You handled Evelyn perfectly," he said, his voice low. "When did you become so strategic?" "When I lost everything," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching, "and had to learn how to fight back." I paused, then added, "You helped me remember that I'm not helpless." Something heated flared in his eyes, and the air between us grew heavy, charged with the attraction we kept dancing around, the unspoken desires that simmered beneath the surface. "Victoria," he said, his voice dropping lower, becoming a caress. "If we're going to work together effectively, we need to address this." "Address what?" I asked, my breath catching in my throat. "The fact that every time I'm near you," he said, his gaze unwavering, "I want to forget about being professional and appropriate. And if I want the same thing, then we'd be making this infinitely more complicated." But he didn't move away, didn't break the connection between us. "After this is over," he continued, his voice rough with barely suppressed desire, "after you've reclaimed your life, if you still want," I interrupted, unable to bear the suspense any longer. "Stop telling me I'm too vulnerable to know what I want." "I'm not fragile," I declared, my voice firm and resolute. "I'm angry and determined and very aware that whatever this is between us isn't going away." Adrian stood, moving around his desk with a predatory grace that sent shivers down my spine. He stopped inches away, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "When this is finished," he said softly, his voice a low growl, "when you're free of them and standing on your own again, I will show you exactly what I want. But not while you're living in my home, depending on my protection. I won't blur those lines." The restraint in his voice, the visible struggle, somehow made the moment more intimate, more charged, than a kiss would have been. "You're incredibly frustrating," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know," he said, a hint of amusement flickering in his eyes. His thumb traced my jaw, featherlight. "Remember that when this is over." My phone buzzed, shattering the tension that had been building between us. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or everyone you care about pays the price." Adrian saw my expression change and took the phone from my hand. His face went cold, his eyes hardening with a dangerous intensity. "They're threatening you directly now," he said, his voice like ice. He made a call immediately, his tone curt and commanding. "I need a trace on this number," he barked into the phone. "Send it to my phone." "Yes, now." He hung up and looked at me, his expression grim. "This changes things. We need to move faster, hit them before they escalate." "How?" I asked, my mind racing. "We need the final piece of evidence," he said, his gaze intense. "Direct proof connecting all three of them to the theft and the conspiracy." He pulled up building schematics on his computer. "Evelyn's home office," he said, pointing to a room on the plans. "My sources say she keeps physical records of everything. Insurance in case her partners turn on her." "You want to break into her house?" I asked, my voice incredulous. "I want to retrieve evidence of crimes she committed," he corrected, his expression deadly serious. "There's a difference, but it's risky. I need someone who knows the house layout, the security systems, the routines." Realization dawned, and I understood what he was asking. "You need me?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need you to tell me if it's possible," he confirmed, his gaze searching mine. "I won't ask you to participate in anything that makes you uncomfortable." I thought about my father, about everything Evelyn had stolen from him, about the 6 months of humiliation and loss that I'd endured. "When do we go?" Adrienne's smile was sharp and approving. "Tomorrow night," he said, his eyes gleaming. "She's hosting a gallery event downtown. The house will be empty except for standard security." The next evening, we parked 3 blocks from the Ashford mansion, shrouded in darkness and secrecy. Adrian had 2 members of his team with us, silent professionals who moved like ghosts, blending into the shadows with ease. I'd been inside the house countless times, knew every entrance, every camera placement, every blind spot. We entered through the garden access, a flaw in the security coverage that my father had never bothered to fix. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered, a painful reminder of a life that had been stolen from me. The marble floors, the sweeping staircase, the artwork that had been in my family for generations, now tainted by Evelyn's presence. Evelyn's office was on the second floor, at the rear corner of the house, a space she guarded with meticulous care. Adrian picked the lock in seconds, his movements precise and efficient, and we slipped inside, undetected. The room was obsessively organized, a testament to Evelyn's controlling nature. Filing cabinets lined the walls, a safe was hidden behind a painting, and computers were protected by passwords that Adrian's specialist bypassed almost immediately. "Start with the files," Adrian directed his team, his voice barely a whisper. "Physical documents first." I moved to the desk, searching through the drawers, my hands shaking with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. My fingers brushed against something hidden in the bottom drawer, a leather portfolio tucked away out of sight. "Locked." "Adrian," I said, my voice urgent. He was beside me instantly, examining the lock with a practiced eye. Within seconds, it clicked open, revealing its contents. Inside were copies of everything, the evidence we needed to bring them down. The fake evidence against me, communications between the three conspirators, even a handwritten timeline of their plan dated from 2 years ago, a meticulous record of their betrayal. "She kept insurance?" I breathed, my voice filled with a mixture of relief and vindication. "In case they turned on her, which they're doing." Adrian photographed every page methodically, capturing every detail. "This is it, Victoria," he said, his voice low but triumphant. "This is everything we need." A sound from downstairs froze us all, cutting through the silence like a knife. The security team leader held up 2 fingers, then pointed down, silently communicating that 2 people had entered the house. Adrian's expression went lethal, his eyes hardening with a dangerous light. He pulled me behind him instinctively, positioning himself between me and the door, ready to protect me at any cost. Voices drifted up the staircase, growing louder as they approached. Jonathan and Sophia, arguing in harsh whispers, their voices filled with panic. "We need to destroy everything," Sophia was saying, her voice shrill with desperation. "If Evelyn kept records, she'd be careless and do. She told me once. We find them and burn them tonight." Footsteps on the stairs, heading straight toward the office. Adrian made rapid hand gestures to his team, silently directing them to their positions. They melted into the shadows on either side of the door, becoming one with the darkness. He pulled me behind a heavy bookshelf, his body shielding mine, protecting me from whatever was about to happen. The door opened, and Jonathan entered first, flipping on the lights, his eyes scanning the room. Sophia followed close behind, already moving toward the filing cabinets, her movements frantic. "Start with the safe," Jonathan directed, his voice tight with urgency. "She's paranoid enough to keep the really damaging stuff there." One of Adrienne's men stepped out silently from behind them, his movements swift and deadly. Before either of them could react, he disabled Jonathan with a brutal efficiency that left him gasping on the floor, struggling for air. The second team member had Sophia restrained before she could even scream, silencing her before she could alert anyone else. Adrian emerged from our hiding spot, pulling me with him, his expression cold enough to freeze blood. "Looking for something?" he asked pleasantly, his voice dangerously soft. Jonathan's face went white when he saw us, then flushed red with rage. "You have no right to be here," he sputtered, his voice filled with impotent fury. "Says the man breaking into his partner's home to destroy evidence." Adrian countered, his smile razor-sharp. "We have everything, Reed. Every communication, every transaction, every piece of your conspiracy documented and recorded." Sophia struggled against the man holding her, her eyes wild with panic. "You can't prove anything," she shrieked, her voice desperate. I stepped forward, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Yes, we can," I said, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. "We have the offshore accounts, the deleted emails, Evelyn's insurance files documenting every step of your plan. I pulled out my phone, showing her the photographs Adrian had taken, the damning evidence that sealed their fate. "It's over," I said, my voice flat. The fight drained out of both of them as they realized the truth, as they understood that their carefully constructed plan had crumbled around them. Adrian called the authorities, his voice calm and controlled. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. He pulled me aside while his team secured Jonathan and Sophia, ensuring they couldn't escape. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes searching mine with concern. My hands were shaking with adrenaline. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I felt more alive than I had in months. "I'm perfect," I said, my voice filled with a newfound strength. His eyes searched mine, seeing the truth, recognizing that I wasn't the broken woman from the gala anymore, but someone who'd fought back and won. "Yes," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "You are." The police took Jonathan and Sophia into custody that night, charging them with breaking and entering initially. Adrienne's lawyers were already preparing the larger case, organizing the mountain of evidence we'd collected, ensuring that they would face the full force of the law. Evelyn was arrested the following morning as she returned from her gallery event, her facade of wealth and power crumbling around her. The look on her face when federal agents appeared at the mansion, catching her completely off guard, was captured by news cameras and broadcast around the world. A public humiliation that was almost as satisfying as seeing her behind bars. I watched the footage 3 times, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction, a sense of justice finally being served. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming, and the world watched as the truth was revealed. Headlines screamed about the conspiracy, the betrayal, the fallen golden boy and his accomplices, their crimes laid bare for all to see. My phone exploded with calls from reporters, former friends, people who'd shunned me 6 months ago, suddenly eager to offer their support, their insincerity as transparent as glass. I ignored all of them, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a response. The FBI wanted extensive interviews, eager to understand the full scope of the conspiracy and bring everyone involved to justice. Adrienne's attorneys coordinated everything, ensuring I had representation and protection throughout the process, shielding me from the media frenzy and the potential for further harm. I spent hours detailing the timeline, the evidence, everything we'd uncovered, reliving the pain and betrayal with each word. Through it all, Adrian was a constant presence, a silent guardian, not hovering, not controlling, but solidly there whenever I needed him, offering his support without question. A week after the arrests, Sophia's lawyer reached out, requesting a meeting, a sign that their carefully constructed alliance was crumbling. Adrian advised against it, warning me that it could be a trap. But curiosity won out, and I decided to meet with her, determined to hear what she had to say. We met at a neutral location, a sterile conference room in her attorney's office, the air thick with tension. Sophia looked haggard, her usually vibrant red hair limp and lifeless, her expensive clothes wrinkled and ill-fitting. The polished veneer that she'd cultivated for so long had cracked completely, revealing the desperation beneath. "I want to make a deal," she said without preamble, her voice hoarse and strained. "I'll testify against Jonathan and Evelyn for a reduced sentence." "Why would I care what deal you make?" I asked, my voice level and detached, refusing to let her see my anger. "Because I can give you everything," she pleaded, her eyes desperate. "The complete timeline, who planned what, how they manipulated you. I can give you the details you need." "Please, Victoria. This was never my idea. They brought me in after it was already planned, after the scheme was already in motion." "You still chose to participate," I pointed out, my voice cold. "You helped them destroy my life, steal my company, and ruin my reputation." "I know," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I'm sorry. Jonathan said you'd be fine, that you'd land on your feet. He said your father left you enough money that you didn't need the company." The casual cruelty of it staggered me, taking my breath away. They'd convinced themselves that their betrayal was acceptable because they believed I'd survive it, that my wealth somehow justified their actions. My father built that company from nothing, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. It was his legacy, his life's work, everything. You helped them steal it, and convinced yourself that I deserved it? I was weak, Sophia choked out, her voice breaking. I was jealous of you, of everything you had. When Jonathan said you'd never notice some missing money, that we could all benefit, I wanted to believe him. I'm so sorry. I made the wrong choice. Adrienne's hand settled on my shoulder, grounding me, pulling me back from the edge of the abyss. I looked at Sophia, this woman who'd had been my closest friend for years, and felt nothing but emptiness. Testify or don't. That's between you and the prosecutors. But we're not friends. We'll never be friends again. I stood and walked out, Adrienne following. In the elevator, the adrenaline finally crashed, and my hands started shaking. You handled that well, Adrienne said quietly. I wanted to scream at her. Tell her sorry doesn't fix anything. But you didn't. You stayed in control. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. That's strength, Victoria. The contact steadied me, reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. That afternoon, Adrienne's investigator called with news. Jonathan had attempted to contact associates in the Cayman Islands, trying to move the remaining stolen funds. Federal authorities had frozen everything. He's desperate, the investigator reported, making mistakes. His lawyers are advising him to take a plea deal. How long until trial? I asked. Months, maybe a year. These things move slowly. A year? A year of waiting for closure, of reliving everything in testimony and cross-examinations. I must have looked overwhelmed because Adrienne dismissed the investigator and pulled me into his office, closing the door. Sit, he commanded gently, guiding me to the leather sofa. I collapsed onto it, suddenly exhausted. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of police interviews, legal meetings, and media attention. I hadn't processed any of it. Adrienne sat beside me, close enough that our thighs touched. Talk to me. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just feel tired because justice is exhausting. Because you're still processing 6 months of trauma. When does it get easier? When you stop expecting it to follow a timeline. His arms slid around my shoulders, pulling me against his side. Healing isn't linear. I let myself lean into him, accepting the comfort. His scent, that familiar blend of wood smoke and oak, wrapped around me like security. We sat in silence for a while, his fingers tracing absent patterns on my arm. The board of directors wants to meet with you, Adrienne said eventually. Ashford Industries. They're voting on new leadership. My heart stuttered. When? Tomorrow. They've seen the evidence clearing you. The news coverage has been favorable. They want you back. Everything I'd lost, everything I'd fought for, was suddenly within reach. And if I don't want to go back? Adrienne pulled back slightly, studying my face. Then you don't. You could do anything, Victoria. Start your own firm. Consult independently. Leave the business world entirely. You're not obligated to reclaim something just because you lost it. The freedom in that statement was dizzying. For months, all I'd focused on was proving my innocence and reclaiming what was stolen. I hadn't considered that I might not want it anymore. I need to think about it. Take the time you need. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, the touch achingly tender. Whatever you decide, I'm here. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. The careful distance he'd maintained was crumbling, and I could see the want there, barely restrained. Adrienne, his name came out almost like a question. You're not dependent on my protection anymore, he said softly. The threat is neutralized. You're free to leave whenever you want. Is that what you want for me to leave? No. The word was rough, honest. But I need you to stay because you want to, not because you need me. I turned to face him fully, our faces inches apart. What if it's both? His jaw clenched, control visibly fraying. Victoria, you said when this was over, when I was standing on my own again. Well, it's over. They're arrested. I'm cleared. And I'm choosing to be here. Something in his expression shifted. The last thread of restraint snapped. His hand cupped the back of my neck, pulling me into a kiss that felt like coming home and catching fire simultaneously. His lips were firm, demanding, claiming. I opened to him immediately, letting 6 weeks of tension and want pour into the kiss. Adrian groaned low in his throat, the sound sending heat straight through me. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer until I was practically in his lap. I went willingly, threading my fingers into his dark hair. The kiss deepened, turned desperate. His teeth caught my bottom lip, and I gasped, which he took full advantage of. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone dark with desire. "Tell me this is what you want," he demanded. Not gratitude, not reaction to stress. "Tell me you want this. I want you." The certainty in my voice left no room for doubt. "Not my protector. Not my ally. You, Adrian. I want you." He kissed me again. Slower this time, but no less intense. His hands mapped my body with reverent thoroughness, learning every curve and response. When his lips trailed down my throat, I arched into him with a moan I couldn't suppress. "Say it again," he murmured against my skin. "I want you." Adrian stood in one fluid motion, lifting me with him. My legs wrapped around his waist instinctively as he carried me down the hallway. Not to the guest room, I realized, but to his bedroom. The space was as austere as the rest of his home, dominated by an enormous bed with dark sheets. He sat me down gently, his hands framing my face. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, though his voice was strained. I answered by pulling him down to me. What happened next was a blur of desperate touches and whispered confessions. Adrian worshipped every inch of me with hands and mouth, taking his time despite the urgency thrumming between us. When we finally came together, it felt less like passion and more like inevitability. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with my head on his chest, I felt something shift fundamentally in my world. This wasn't just physical. This was profound, dangerous, irreversible. "I meant what I said earlier," Adrian murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "About being here. You don't have to decide about Ashford Industries immediately. Take whatever time you need." "And where will I be while I'm deciding here if you want?" He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Or your own place. Whatever makes you comfortable. But I'd prefer you here." "Why?" "Because I've gotten used to having you in my space, in my life." His arm tightened around me. "Because somewhere between investigating your case and now, you became more important than anything else." The vulnerability in his admission made my chest ache. "I've never felt safer than I do with you." "Good. That's how it should be." My phone buzzed from somewhere on the floor where our clothes had ended up. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Adrian sighed and reached down, fishing it from my jacket pocket. His expression went dark as he read the screen. "What is it?" "Text from an unknown number." He showed me the screen. *, "Congratulations on your vindication. But understand this, Volov isn't your savior. He's dangerous, and eventually, he'll hurt you like he's hurt everyone who gets close to him." My blood ran cold. Who would send this? Someone trying to drive a wedge between us? Adrienne's voice was hard. "Someone who knows enough about me to weaponize my reputation." "Is there truth to it?" I asked quietly. "Have you hurt people?" He met my eyes steadily. "I've made enemies. Done things I'm not proud of to protect what's mine. But I would never hurt you, Victoria. That's a line I won't cross." I believed him. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. "Then whoever sent this can go to hell." Adrienne's smile was fierce and approving. He pulled me closer, and I let myself sink into the warmth and safety of his embrace, choosing to ignore the small voice warning that nothing this perfect ever lasted. The anonymous messages continued sporadically over the next few days, each one designed to make me doubt Adrian, doubt our relationship, doubt everything we'd built together. We ignored them, focusing instead on the legal proceedings and the board meeting at Ashford Industries. When the day arrived, I dressed in the armor I knew best. Tailored charcoal suit, emerald blouse that brought out my eyes, hair swept into a professional bun. Adrian had offered to come with me, but I declined. This was something I needed to do alone. The boardroom felt smaller than I remembered. 12 directors sat around the polished table, faces I'd known for years. Some looked uncomfortable, others openly apologetic. They'd all voted to remove me based on false evidence. Miss Ashford, the chairman, Gerald Mitchell, stood as I entered. "Thank you for coming. We owe you an apology that words can't adequately express." "You're right, they can't." I took my seat, meeting each director's gaze in turn. "You knew me, knew my father, yet you believed I was capable of theft without demanding concrete proof." Evelyn was very convincing, another director offered weakly, and Jonathan showed us documentation that seemed irrefutable. Documentation that a 5-minute audit would have revealed as fraudulent. I kept my voice level, professional. "But none of you thought to verify. You just accepted the word of a woman who married into this family and a man dating me for access." The room fell silent. However, I continued, "Dwelling on past failures won't move us forward. I'm here because you requested this meeting. What exactly are you proposing?" Gerald cleared his throat. "We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer, not CFO, but CEO. Complete control of operations with full board support and a compensation package that reflects our regret for what happened. Everything I'd lost handed back. More than I'd lost, actually. My father's dream of me leading the company finally realized. It should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt surprisingly calm. "I need 72 hours to consider," I said, "and I'll want complete autonomy on restructuring, new financial controls, ethics oversight, transparent reporting. If I take this position, we do things differently. Of course, whatever you need." I left the boardroom feeling oddly detached. The triumph I'd expected wasn't there. Just a quiet sense of choice, of possibility. Adrian was waiting in his car outside the building. He took one look at my face and asked what happened. "They offered me CEO, and I don't know if I want it anymore." The admission felt freeing. 6 months ago, I would have killed for this. Now I'm not sure the company is where I belong. He reached over and took my hand. "Then don't decide today. Live with the possibility for a while." That afternoon, federal prosecutors contacted us. Sophia had agreed to testify against Jonathan and Evelyn in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her cooperation would expedite the trial significantly. "They're offering Jonathan a plea deal," the prosecutor explained over the phone. 6 years federal prison plus full restitution. If he refuses and goes to trial, he's looking at 15 to 20. "What about Evelyn?" I asked. "She's refusing to negotiate, insists she'll be acquitted. Her attorney is aggressive, well-connected." The prosecutor paused, "But we have her dead to rights. The physical evidence from her office, the electronic communications, Sophia's testimony. She's going down." The timeline was set. Preliminary hearings would begin within weeks. Actual trials within 3 months. "You'll need to testify," the prosecutor warned. "They'll cross-examine you, try to make you look incompetent or complicit. It won't be pleasant." "I can handle it." Adrian squeezed my hand after I hung up. "You don't have to handle it alone." "I know." I leaned into him. "That's the difference now. I know I'm not alone." 3 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and rebuilding. True to her word, Sophia provided damning testimony about how the conspiracy unfolded. Jonathan took the plea deal after his attorney made clear how badly trial would go. Evelyn fought until the bitter end. Her trial lasted 2 weeks, with her lawyers attacking every piece of evidence, questioning every witness. When I took the stand, her attorney tried to paint me as a spoiled heiress seeking revenge against a stepmother who tried to save a failing company. Adrian sat in the gallery every single day, a silent pillar of support. When the cross-examination got particularly brutal, I'd glance his way and find strength in his steady presence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, Evelyn's composure finally cracked. She screamed accusations at me across the courtroom. Security had to physically restrain her. The judge sentenced her to 8 years federal prison with full restitution ordered. Jonathan got his 6 years. Sophia received 2 years plus community service for her cooperation. Standing outside the courthouse afterward, reporters swarmed with questions. I gave a brief statement about justice being served and faith in the legal system. Then Adrienne's security team extracted us efficiently. In the car, I finally let myself feel it. Relief, vindication, closure. Tears streamed down my face, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of everything finally being over. Adrian pulled me into his arms, letting me cry against his shoulder without trying to fix it or hurry it along. When I finally calmed, he kissed my forehead gently. "Proud of you," he murmured. "So damn proud. Thank you for everything." I looked up at him. "I wouldn't have survived this without you." "Yes, you would have. Maybe not as quickly, but you're stronger than you know." "Still thank you." The board of Ashford Industries contacted me the next day. They'd waited respectfully through the trial, but now wanted my decision. I thought about my father, about the legacy he'd built, thought about the company he'd poured his life into. Then I thought about who I'd become in the past months, the strength I discovered, the future I wanted. "I'll accept the CEO position," I told Gerald Mitchell, "on the conditions I outlined and with the understanding that I'm doing this my way." "Agreed. When can you start?" 2 weeks. "I need time to prepare." My first day back at Ashford Industries felt surreal. Walking into the building I'd been exiled from, taking the elevator to the executive floor, sitting in the corner office that had been my father's. The staff welcomed me with genuine warmth. Many admitted they'd never believed the accusations but had been too afraid to speak up. I understood. Evelyn had created an atmosphere of fear and control. "We're going to change that," I announced in my first company-wide meeting. "Transparency, ethics, and integrity will be our foundation. Anyone who sees something questionable, you report it without fear of retaliation. We rebuild this company's reputation by earning it." The applause was thunderous. Adrian sent flowers to my office that afternoon. No card, just 24 white roses. I knew they were from him anyway. We fell into a new rhythm. I'd spend days at Ashford Industries, implementing changes and rebuilding. Evenings were spent at Adrienne's penthouse, which had become home in a way my old apartment never felt again. One night, about a month after I'd taken over as CEO, I found Adrian in his office looking troubled. Papers were spread across his desk, his expression dark. "What's wrong?" He looked up, clearly debating whether to tell me. "The federal prosecutor who handled your case called. There's an investigation into my business practices. Someone filed complaints about methods used during your investigation." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaints?" "Allegations of illegal surveillance, bribery of officials, extortion." His jaw clenched. "Nothing provable, but enough to trigger scrutiny. Because you helped me. Because I made enemies who are using this as leverage." He stood, moving to stare out the window. I knew this might happen. Knew there could be consequences. Then we fight it. I moved to stand beside him. "You stood by me through everything. Now I stand by you, Victoria. This could get ugly. Drag you back into scrutiny. You've just escaped. I don't care." I took his hand, forcing him to look at me. "You taught me to fight back. Let me return the favor." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "I've never had someone willing to fight for me before." "Well, you do now. We're in this together." He pulled me into his arms, holding tight. Together, he agreed. I contacted the best legal team Ashford Industries had on retainer, putting them at Adrienne's disposal. Used my newly restored reputation and connections to request meetings with prosecutors, presenting documentation of every method Adrian had used during the investigation. Everything had been legal, if aggressive. Private investigators with proper licenses, information from public records or willing witnesses. Nothing crossed the line into criminality. It took 6 weeks, countless meetings, and strategic pressure from influential allies, but eventually, the investigation was closed. Insufficient evidence to proceed, the official notice stated. Adrian received the news while we were having dinner at his penthouse. He read the email twice as if he couldn't quite believe it. "It's over," I said softly. "You're clear." He looked at me with an intensity that stole my breath. "You did this. Used everything you'd rebuilt to protect me." "Of course I did. You're worth protecting." He was out of his chair and pulling me into his arms before I could blink. The kiss was fierce, grateful, possessive. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he said quietly. Probably have for weeks now, but was too cautious to admit it. My heart stuttered. "Oh, you love me?" Completely, terrifyingly. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. His hands cupped my face. "You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. I love you too." The words came easily, naturally. "I think I started falling for you that first night when you asked me to dance and offered me hope." His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face. "That simple? That simple." He kissed me again, slower this time, savoring. When he pulled back, his expression was serious again. "Move in with me officially. Not as a guest or someone under protection, but as my partner. I'm basically already living here. Then make it official. Bring your things, take over half the closet, argue with me about decorating choices." I laughed, the sound light and free. "Yes, absolutely yes." Moving in officially meant merging our lives in ways both mundane and profound. Adrian cleared out half his closet with military precision, reorganized his kitchen to accommodate my cooking habits, and tolerated my insistence on adding color to his monochrome aesthetic. "This throw pillow is unnecessary," he complained, eyeing the deep blue cushion I'd placed on the sofa. "This entire apartment was unnecessary levels of gray," I countered. "Now it has personality." He pulled me into his arms, kissing my neck. "I have personality. Terrifying and brooding isn't a design choice." His laugh rumbled against my back, and I felt that now familiar warmth spread through my chest. This was home. Not the penthouse, not the expensive furniture, but this feeling of belonging with someone who saw all of me and chose to stay anyway. Work at Ashford Industries was demanding, but rewarding. I'd implemented new financial controls, hired an independent ethics officer, and established transparent reporting practices. The company's reputation was slowly recovering. New contracts were being secured. 3 months after taking over as CEO, we landed a major government contract for aerospace components. The deal was worth $40 million over 5 years, validation that Ashford Industries was back on solid ground. I celebrated by taking Adrian to the small Italian restaurant where we'd had our first real conversation. "Full circle," he observed, raising his wine glass, the night everything had started shifting between us. From investigating a conspiracy to running the company they tried to steal. "Couldn't have done it without you." I clinked my glass against his. "You gave me the tools to fight back. You had the strength all along. I just helped you remember it." The sincerity in his voice made my throat tight. We'd both been broken in different ways when we met. Now we were building something stronger together. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it, then froze. "What is it?" Adrian asked, immediately alert. Anonymous email, no return address. I opened it with shaking hands, reading the brief message. "Thank you for exposing the truth. I was an analyst at Ashford Industries during the theft. I suspected something was wrong but was too afraid to speak up. Evelyn had created an environment where questioning anything meant losing your job. What you did took courage. You saved more than just yourself. You gave us our integrity back." Tears pricked my eyes. I'd been so focused on my own vindication that I hadn't fully considered how many others had been affected by Evelyn's corruption. "Everything okay?" Adrian reached across the table, taking my hand. "Yeah, just a reminder that this was bigger than just my reputation." I showed him the email. "People were scared. I helped change that. You did more than help. You transformed the entire culture." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Your father would be proud." The mention of my dad sent an ache through my chest, but it was gentler now, less raw. Time and justice had dulled the sharpest edges of grief. "I think he would be," I agreed softly. That weekend we attended a charity gala together. Not the Ashford fundraiser where we'd first met, but a different event supporting foster children. Adrian had been a major donor for years, something I'd only recently learned. "You never mentioned supporting this cause," I said as we entered the ballroom. "I don't advertise my charitable work. It's not about recognition." He guided me through the crowd with a hand on my lower back. "My mother was in foster care before immigrating to America. She always said someone's kindness gave her a second chance. I like to pay that forward. Another layer of complexity to this man I loved. He could be ruthless in business, terrifying when protecting what was his, yet quietly supported causes close to his heart. We ran into several people from my former social circle, the ones who'd shunned me after the accusations. Their reactions ranged from embarrassed apologies to attempts at casual conversation as if nothing had happened. "Victoria, you look amazing," one woman gushed. "We must get coffee soon and catch up." I gave her a polite smile. "I'm quite busy these days. Running Ashford Industries doesn't leave much free time." Her expression faltered, realizing I wasn't going to pretend we were still friends. Adrienne's hand squeezed mine supportively as we moved away. "You handled that gracefully. I'm learning to let go of people who only valued me when I was useful." "Good. You deserve better." The evening was pleasant, filled with conversations about business and philanthropy rather than scandal and gossip. When the orchestra began playing, Adrien led me onto the dance floor, just as he had that first night. "Remember this?" he murmured, pulling me close. "How could I forget? You offered me hope when I had none. You gave me something to fight for beyond building an empire." His eyes held mine, intense and warm. "You gave me purpose again." We swayed together, the rest of the room fading into background noise. This moment felt significant somehow, like we were acknowledging how far we'd come and how much we'd overcome, not just as individuals but as a team. Had been my closest friend for years, and I felt a hollowness deep inside. Whether he testified or not was up to him, a choice between him and the prosecutors. But as far as I was concerned, the friendship was irrevocably broken. "We're not friends," I stated, my voice firm. "We'll never be friends again." I turned and walked out of the room, Adrien right behind me. The elevator seemed to shrink around us as the adrenaline that had kept me going finally gave way. My hands began to tremble, a physical manifestation of the emotional storm raging within. "You handled that well," Adrien said quietly, his voice a low rumble that barely broke the silence. The urge to lash out, to scream that apologies were meaningless and couldn't undo the damage, was almost overwhelming. "But you didn't," he continued, his eyes fixed on me. "You stayed in control." Then his hand found mine. His strong, capable fingers intertwined with mine, offering a silent reassurance. "That's strength, Victoria." The simple act of physical contact grounded me, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this ordeal. A wave of gratitude washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the anger and pain. Later that afternoon, Adrienne's investigator delivered some much-needed news. Jonathan, in a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of his ill-gotten gains, had tried to contact his associates in the Cayman Islands to move the stolen funds. Fortunately, federal authorities had anticipated this move and had frozen all of his assets. "He's desperate," the investigator reported, his voice laced with a hint of satisfaction. "He's making mistakes. His lawyers are now advising him to take a plea deal to minimize the damage." "How long until the trial?" I asked, already dreading the prospect of reliving the entire nightmare. "Months, maybe even a year," the investigator replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "These things tend to move at a snail's pace." A year. The thought was almost unbearable. A year of uncertainty, of waiting for closure, of having to revisit the painful details through endless testimonies and grueling cross-examinations. The sheer weight of it all must have shown on my face because Adrien immediately dismissed the investigator, then gently steered me into his private office, closing the door behind us. "Sit," he commanded softly, guiding me toward the plush leather sofa. I practically collapsed onto it, the exhaustion hitting me like a physical blow. The past 2 weeks had been a relentless barrage of police interviews, legal meetings, and unwanted media attention. I hadn't had a moment to process the trauma, to truly come to terms with what had happened. Adrien sat down beside me, close enough that our thighs brushed, a subtle gesture of comfort and solidarity. "Talk to me," he urged, his voice gentle and encouraging. I had imagined feeling triumphant, vindicated, once Jonathan and Evelyn were brought to justice. But instead, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of weariness. Justice, I realized, was an exhausting process. Because you're still processing 6 months of trauma, Adrian observed, his eyes filled with understanding. When does it get easier? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. When you stop expecting it to follow a timeline, he replied, his words offering a different kind of solace. He reached out and slid his arm around my shoulders, drawing me closer to his side. Healing wasn't a linear progression, he seemed to be saying, but a messy, unpredictable journey. I allowed myself to lean into him, gratefully accepting his comfort and support. His familiar scent, a comforting blend of wood smoke and oak, enveloped me like a protective shield. We sat in comfortable silence for a long while, his fingers tracing soothing, absent-minded patterns on my arm. The board of directors wants to meet with you, Adrian said eventually, breaking the silence. Ashford Industries, they're scheduling a vote on new leadership. My heart skipped a beat. When? Tomorrow. They've seen the evidence that clears your name. The news coverage has been overwhelmingly positive. They want you back. Everything I had lost, everything I had fought so hard to reclaim, was suddenly within my grasp once more. What if I don't want to go back? I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. Adrian pulled back slightly, his gaze searching my face. Then you don't have to, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. You have so many options, Victoria. You could start your own firm, become an independent consultant, or leave the business world entirely. You're under no obligation to reclaim something just because you lost it. The sheer freedom of that statement was almost dizzying. For months, my entire focus had been on proving my innocence and reclaiming what had been stolen from me. I hadn't even considered the possibility that I might no longer desire what I had once valued above all else. I need to think about it, I said, feeling overwhelmed by the possibilities. Take all the time you need, he replied, his voice gentle and understanding. His thumb brushed lightly across my cheekbone, the touch sending a shiver down my spine. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch in my throat. The carefully maintained distance he had kept between us was starting to crumble, and I could see the desire there, barely contained, threatening to break free. Adrian, I said his name, and it came out almost like a question. You're no longer dependent on my protection, he said softly, his eyes fixed on mine. The threat has been neutralized. You are free to leave whenever you choose. Is that what you want? Do you want me to leave? I asked, needing to know, needing to understand his true feelings. No, he answered, the word raw and honest, torn from the depths of his soul. But I need you to stay because you want to be here, not because you feel obligated to stay because of me. I turned to face him fully, our faces mere inches apart, the air crackling with unspoken tension. What if it's both? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What if I want to be here, and I also feel a need for you in my life? His jaw tightened, his control visibly fraying at the edges. Victoria, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You said that when this was all over, when you were standing on your own 2 feet again. Well, it's over. They've been arrested. Your name has been cleared. And I need to know that you're choosing to be here with me. Something in his expression shifted, the last vestiges of restraint finally giving way. He raised his hand and cupped the back of my neck, gently pulling me into a kiss that felt like coming home and catching fire all at once. His lips were firm, demanding, and possessive, staking a claim that had been long overdue. I opened myself to him without hesitation, allowing 6 weeks of pent-up tension and longing to pour into the kiss. Adrian groaned low in his throat, the sound sending a jolt of heat straight through me. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer until I was practically straddling his lap. I went willingly, instinctively threading my fingers through his dark hair. The kiss deepened, becoming more desperate and urgent. His teeth gently grazed my bottom lip, eliciting a gasp that he immediately took full advantage of. When we finally broke apart, both breathless and trembling, his eyes were dark with raw desire. Tell me this is what you want, he demanded, his voice husky with need. Not gratitude, not a reaction to the stress, but a genuine desire. Tell me you want this. Tell me you want me. The certainty in my voice left no room for doubt. Not my protector, I said, my voice filled with conviction. Not my ally. You, Adrian. I want you. He kissed me again, this time slower and more deliberately, but no less intense. His hands moved over my body with reverent thoroughness, learning every curve and contour, every secret response. When his lips trailed down my throat, I arched into him, letting out a soft moan that I couldn't suppress. Say it again, he murmured against my skin, his breath hot and ragged. I want you, I repeated, my voice trembling with passion. Adrian stood up in one fluid motion, lifting me effortlessly with him. My legs instinctively wrapped around his waist as he carried me out of the office and down the hallway. It wasn't the guest room he was heading for, I realized with a surge of anticipation, but his own private bedroom. The space was just as austere and minimalist as the rest of his penthouse, dominated by an enormous bed draped with dark, luxurious sheets. He gently set me down on my feet, his hands framing my face. Last chance to change your mind, he said, his voice strained with a mixture of desire and uncertainty. I answered him by pulling his head down to mine and kissing him with all the pent-up longing and passion I had kept bottled inside for so long. What happened next was a whirlwind of desperate touches, whispered confessions, and unbridled passion. Adrian worshipped every inch of my body with his hands and his mouth, taking his time to savor every moment despite the urgent need that thrummed between us. When we finally came together, it felt less like a mere act of passion and more like an inevitable culmination of everything that had transpired between us, a joining of souls that had been destined to be together. Afterward, as I lay wrapped in his arms, my head resting against his chest, I felt something fundamentally shift within my world. This wasn't just a physical connection, although the physical aspect was undeniably incredible. This was something far more profound, more dangerous, and utterly irreversible. I meant what I said earlier, Adrian murmured, his fingers tracing delicate patterns on my bare shoulder, about being here for you. You don't have to rush into a decision about Ashford Industries. Take all the time you need to consider your options. And where will I be while I'm deciding? I asked, needing reassurance. Here, if that's what you want, he replied, pressing a tender kiss to my temple, or at your own place if you prefer. Whatever makes you feel most comfortable. But I'd prefer you here with me, he admitted, his voice softening. Why? I asked, wanting to hear him say the words. Because I've grown accustomed to having you in my space, in my life, he explained, his arm tightening around me protectively. Somewhere between investigating your case and now, you've become more important to me than anything else in the world. The vulnerability in his confession made my chest ache with tenderness. I've never felt safer than I do when I'm with you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Good, he replied, his voice a low rumble against my ear. That's exactly how it should be. Just then, my phone buzzed incessantly from somewhere on the floor, buried beneath the tangled mess of our discarded clothes. I ignored it, hoping whoever was trying to reach me would give up. But the buzzing persisted, growing more insistent with each passing moment. Adrian sighed and reached down, fishing the phone out of my jacket pocket. His expression immediately darkened as he read the message on the screen. What is it? I asked, my heart sinking with a sense of foreboding. It's a text message from an unknown number, he replied, his voice grim. He turned the phone around so that I could read the screen. The message was short and to the point, but it sent a chill straight through my veins. Asterisk, congratulations on your vindication. But understand this, Volov isn't your savior. He's a dangerous man, and eventually he'll hurt you just like he's hurt everyone else who gets close to him. My blood ran cold. Who would send something like this? I wondered aloud, my mind racing. Is someone trying to drive a wedge between us, to destroy what we've built? Adrienne's voice was hard and devoid of emotion. Someone who knows enough about my past to use my reputation against me, he replied grimly. Is there any truth to it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Have you hurt people, Adrian? He met my gaze steadily, without flinching. I've made enemies, Victoria. I've done things I'm not particularly proud of to protect what is mine. But I would never intentionally hurt you. That's a line I would never cross. I wanted to, We'd come so far from those desperate beginnings. "Marry me," Adrian said suddenly. I missed a step, nearly stumbling. "What? Not now. Not today." His expression was serious, almost painfully vulnerable. "But eventually, when the timing feels right, when we're both ready, marry me, Victoria," he continued. "Build a life with me that's about more than just surviving or fighting. Build something real." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against my bones. "That's a hell of a non-proposal." "It's a promise," he corrected softly, his eyes locked on mine, "that I'm completely in this for however long you'll have me." His hand cupped my face gently, his touch feather-light but firm. "No pressure, no timeline, just the certainty that I want a future with you in it." "Yes," I whispered eventually, the word catching in my throat. "Yes, when we're ready. Yes." His smile was brilliant, utterly transforming his usually serious features, lighting up his whole face. He kissed me right there on the dance floor, not caring who was watching or what anyone thought of our public display. We were no longer defined by what had been done to us, or who had tried to destroy us and tear us apart. We were defined by how we'd fought back, tooth and nail, how we'd chosen each other, and how we'd built something stronger and more resilient from the ruins of our past. 6 months had passed in a blink since that first gala, since Adrian Volkov had walked into my life and irrevocably changed everything I thought I knew. 6 months since I'd been the disgraced Heiress, the one everyone mocked and dismissed with a wave of their hand. Now, I was the CEO of a thriving company, completely and utterly in love with a man who saw my strength even when I couldn't see it myself. I was building a future that I had honestly thought was impossible just a short time before. The epilogue of our story came 3 months later, quietly and unexpectedly. Ashford Industries had grown by 23%, a testament to our hard work. Our commitment to transparency and ethical practices was finally attracting new investors and lucrative contracts, bolstering the company's prospects. The board was stable, and the company culture had been completely transformed into a place of respect and dignity. Adrian had consolidated his business interests, finally distancing himself from the more questionable and less savory aspects of his vast empire. He credited my influence for this, though I secretly suspected he'd been looking for a valid reason to legitimize everything all along. Anyway, regardless of the reason, we'd found a rhythm that worked seamlessly for us. We spent challenging days at our respective companies, dealing with the daily grind, and then quiet evenings at home, relishing each other's company. Our weekends were spent exploring the vibrant city or traveling to far-off places, learning each other's habits and quirks, and building intimacy through thousands of small, seemingly insignificant moments that added up to something extraordinary. On a particularly crisp Sunday morning, I woke to find Adrian already up and dressed, standing on the penthouse terrace with a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. I joined him, wrapping a warm blanket tightly around my shoulders against the sharp autumn chill that hung in the air. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, sliding under his arm and leaning my head against his shoulder. "Just thinking," he murmured, kissing the top of my head, "about how incredibly different life looks now compared to just a year ago. Better or worse?" "Infinitely better," he said without hesitation. He turned me to face him, his expression tender and full of love. "A year ago I was successful, yes, but also empty. I was just going through the motions, building an empire without really understanding why I was doing it." He paused, his gaze intense. "Then you walked into that gala, and everything changed in a heartbeat. I was broken a year ago," I confessed quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Humiliated, lost, convinced I'd never recover from the fallout." I met his gaze, finding strength in his unwavering support. "And now I know that losing everything was absolutely necessary. It showed me who I really am when stripped of reputation and privilege." I met his eyes, a silent understanding passing between us. "It brought me to you. We saved each other," Adrian said simply, his voice full of emotion. "You gave me a purpose beyond mere acquisition and empty revenge. I helped you find your strength again." A letter had arrived just yesterday, forwarded through my ever-efficient assistant from Sophia. She was writing from the minimum security facility where she was serving her sentence for her crimes. It had been brief, but incredibly painful in its raw honesty. She detailed her consuming jealousy, her crippling weakness, and her deep regret, not asking for forgiveness, but simply acknowledging the truth of her actions. At the end, she'd written, "You became the person I always pretended to be, strong, principled, and unbreakable. I'm sorry I couldn't see that until I had destroyed everything." I'd shown Adrian the letter, uncertain how to truly feel about its contents. "She's facing the consequences of her actions," he'd said, his voice measured and calm. "She's learning some very hard lessons about life. Whether you forgive her eventually is completely your choice, Victoria. There's no right or wrong answer in this situation." I decided to write back to Sophia, not offering forgiveness, but acknowledging her honesty and the courage it took to finally face the truth. Some wounds healed cleanly, while others left scars that remained as permanent reminders of the past. That was acceptable. That was life. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asked now, studying my face with a keen and perceptive gaze. "How trauma changes us," I replied, turning back to the breathtaking view of the city. "Sometimes it breaks us completely, but sometimes it forges us into something stronger and more resilient than we ever thought possible." "Philosopher Victoria," he teased gently, a playful glint in his eyes. "I like it." His arms tightened around me, pulling me closer to his warmth. "What else are you thinking about?" "That I'm happy," I admitted, the words tumbling out without hesitation. "Actually, genuinely happy for the first time in over a year." "Good," he said, his voice low and husky. "That's how it should be." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher over the majestic Manhattan skyline, the city slowly awakening and bustling with activity below us. Somewhere out there, Evelyn and Jonathan were serving their sentences for their crimes. Sophia was hopefully finding her own difficult path to redemption and healing. The people who had tried so desperately to destroy me and tear my life apart were finally facing the consequences of their actions. While I had rebuilt everything from the ground up, but I wasn't really thinking about them anymore. I refused to be defined by their betrayal or my burning desire for vengeance. I was defined by what I'd chosen to build in the aftermath of their destruction. The company I was actively transforming into a beacon of ethical business, the fulfilling life I was meticulously creating, and the unexpected love I'd found in the most unlikely and unexpected place. "Ready for breakfast?" Adrian asked eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. "I was thinking of attempting those pancakes you like so much. You're going to burn them again, just like last time," I pointed out with a playful smirk. "Probably," he conceded with a shrug. "But I'll try anyway." I laughed, letting him pull me back inside the warm penthouse. This was what true happiness looked like, I realized with sudden clarity. Not dramatic gestures or grand declarations of love, but simple, quiet Sunday mornings spent making mediocre pancakes with someone who loved you unconditionally, despite and because of everything you'd survived and overcome. "Adrian," I said softly as he pulled the necessary ingredients from the cabinet, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Yeah. Thank you," I said, my voice full of genuine emotion. "For seeing me that night at the gala, for believing in me even when I couldn't bring myself to believe in myself." He crossed the room to me, flour already somehow dusted on his shirt, and kissed me with a gentleness that beautifully contrasted his usual intensity. "I didn't save you, Victoria," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You saved yourself every single step of the way. I just made sure you weren't alone while you were doing it." His forehead rested against mine, his eyes locked on mine. "That's what love is all about, Victoria. Not rescue but partnership. Standing beside someone, offering unwavering support, while they find their own strength within themselves." "Then thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "for standing beside me. Always," he promised, his voice a low rumble. "For however long you'll have me." "Forever sounds good," I whispered back, my heart overflowing with happiness and gratitude. His smile was answer enough. We made terrible pancakes that morning, laughed at the ridiculous mess we created in the kitchen, and spent the rest of the afternoon happily planning a trip to the coast. Normal, mundane, and utterly perfect. 6 months ago, I had walked into a gala expecting humiliation and public disgrace and found hope instead. I found a man who saw past the scandalous accusations to the strong and resilient person underneath. I found the courage and strength to fight back and reclaim everything that truly mattered to me. Everyone had mocked the disgraced Heiress Sterling, writing her off as a casualty of scandal. They never imagined she'd rise from the ashes, stronger and more formidable than before. They never imagined that the feared Mafia boss they whispered about in hushed tones would reveal not just who had framed her, but who she truly was beneath the false accusations. Someone unbreakable. Someone worth fighting for. Someone who'd finally learned that true strength wasn't about never falling, but about rising every single time life knocked you down, harder and stronger than before. And I'd keep rising, with Adrian beside me, building a future neither of us had ever imagined, but both of us undeniably deserved.